Hello, it's good to be with you today. I have prepared a special presentation this evening. One of my favorite subjects is the Hudson Valley Boomerang sightings between 1982 and 1989. We're talking about 25,000 witnesses saw this. This is literally the largest UFO sighting. I think it actually eclipses Phoenix Lights 97. I think it actually does, just for the sheer volume of people that saw this and the duration. To this day, it has not been properly explained. It hasn't been exposed to what it actually is. No one's actually made an accurate explanation, and there's a couple of different things that people think it might be. Now, we know it's not planes flying in formation. They were involved partially, but that doesn't explain everything. So that's the first thing. So what I want to do in this presentation, I want to drill down on a gentleman's research. His name is Tony Gonsalves. He's an unsung hero in this field. I don't think he got the credit he deserves. I think he has a piece of the story here, because there's something fishy going on with the Hudson Valley Boomerang. So let's look into this, and we'll continue on here. And we'll move on to our next slide here. This is the man right here. This is Tony Gonsalves. This is his wife, Peggy. He was a genius. I've got some bio points on him. He was into Mustangs. He's a mechanical guy, built these beautiful ship models, very well detailed. Great guy. He's no longer with us. He was into sailing. He was in the Navy. The guy was a genius. He could piece things together. So, it's been almost 10 years. I tracked down his widow. She allowed me to do a 30-minute videotape interview with her, describing the whole background on Tony. And then what I think is interesting, I'm going to move on. She allowed me to take a photograph of something very special that I want to show you today. Let's move on. So here's a couple of bio points here. Tony was born on March 8th, 1942. Graduated from East Providence High School in 1959. He served in the U.S. Navy for 4 years as a jet mechanic and plane captain. He served aboard 3 aircraft carriers: USS Intrepid, USS FDR, USS Constellation. On the FDR, he was assigned to the catapult officer. His specific responsibility was to check the weight of every aircraft before being launched off the carrier deck. During his tour of duty, Tony was exposed to military aircraft flying at night at different speeds, both subsonic and supersonic. At different altitudes, he witnessed dogfights, missile tests, and rescue operations. He saw fighters, bombers, and reconnaissance aircraft. So what I'm saying here is this is the perfect witness to compare what we know about the Hudson Valley Boomerang sightings. He'd been around aircraft, flight controls, ailerons, rudders, vertical stabilizers, bomb racks. I mean, this guy was around aviation for years. So this is a perfect witness to be talking about the Hudson Valley Boomerang. So here's Roanoke Times, February 19th, 1990. What he did is he looked at the witness testimony from many different sources. He interviewed people. He interviewed people from the book Night Siege. So I want to give credit to Night Siege. And he started piecing this story together from the eyewitness testimony. And what they were describing was a boomerang-shaped craft with a triangle trailing edge. It had translucent panels on the bottom, and then it had lights on the bottom. We're not talking about airplanes flying in formation, because this thing could make a 180-degree flat turn 30 feet above the treetops. That's not aircraft. We're talking about something else. So he took all this eyewitness testimony together, and he built this model that you see here. And he went around the country, different states, giving this lecture about what people were seeing. So let's zoom in a little bit here, and you can kind of get an idea of what this thing looks like. I'd say 36 inches across. It's a genius. It's absolutely genius. So what I want to do now, let's go over to his model that he built. And this is just a work of art. Fiberglass molds. He's actually got hair dryer motors inside. So this thing actually turns about the vertical axis. Let me give you a different perspective. So here's the air intakes for the hair dryers. He's got the mounting sections here. And this actually rotates. It's just genius. The guy did a fantastic. This is priceless. This is absolutely priceless model. This is about a 3/4 front view looking down on the right side of the aircraft. Shows you the flight controls. Shows you the B-2 cockpit here, leading edge. So it mimics the eyewitness reports. This is aft view, showing you where the D sub connectors plug in here, power cords and everything. So just giving you an idea of what this thing actually looks like in the real world in full color here. This is 3/4 on the left front side, showing you the air intakes and the little slots and holes that he's drilled, and then the mounting sections. But you can see it's got the same smooth contouring, continuous contour that the B-2 has. Now, this is the control panel where you plug everything in. So he's got the power control. He's got the hair dryer motors here. He's got the lights. It blinks. It does the exact same lighting pattern that the witnesses saw back in 1983. I mean, the guy's a genius. The guy did a great job. This is the bottom view. That port on the bottom, that was seen by witnesses as well. And then he's got these transparent panels. So what he did is he literally took the eyewitness testimony and plugged that data into this scale model that he built. Absolutely beautiful job. This is a little bit of a blow up here, and you can see this port on the bottom here. So let's go to Rannoch Times, July 17th, 1994. And it says UFOs military linked. And I'm going to do a deep dive in just two of the things here. And this is his conclusion here. My conclusion is that these are definitely aircraft that are owned, operated, and deployed by the United States of America. Wings in outer space make no sense at all. That, he said, is a clear indication that they are of domestic origin. So is there something going on with the Hudson Valley Boomerang that we don't know about? Are we all being played? Is something going on with Northrop and the B-2 and something else that was funded through the B-2 funding? Is there another prototype going on with the B-2? At the very least, something fishy is going on that hasn't been explained here. Let's move on to MUFON Journal 1990. Spring 1988, 9 p.m., event near Gulf Breeze, Florida. Investigators Carol and Rex Salisbury. A woman was driving when she came upon a dark arrowhead or possibly boomerang-shaped object moving at jogging speed just above nearby treetops. Its wingspan was estimated at 150 feet plus, while from the rounded nose to the apex of a flat V rear edge appeared in excess of 100 feet. Floodlight-sized round white lights bordered the entire perimeter. The woman slowed and noticed other drivers slowly and stopping. The vehicle then passed slowly and directly over her car, and through her open sunroof, she realized that the underside comprised sections and panels rather than a continuously smooth surface. She drove on, continuing to see it in her rearview mirror until out of range. Duration was 3 to 5 minutes. So here we've got this large boomerang-shaped craft literally hovering above her vehicle. It had panels on the bottom, and it had these large floodlights on the bottom. So we're not talking about the B-2. I don't want to get anyone confused here. I am not talking about the B-2 that we know of today that rolled out November 22nd, 1988 over at Palmdale Air Force Plant 42 with the jet engines. I'm not talking about that. I want to make this very clear. We are talking about something else here. Some massive boomerang dark-shaped craft with transparent panels on the bottom, floodlights on the bottom, shining these lights down on the Taconic State Parkway. That's what we're talking about. That's not the B-2 stealth bomber. Something else is going on here. Quote from B-2 subcontractor. And this is someone that Tony had tracked down. And he says, "I'll tell you this much. Your friend is right," referring to Tony. "We are flying nuclear reactors on aircraft. You'll never see one flying in the rain." Is that a clue? Is that a clue? Number one, we're flying nuclear reactors. So that's not the B-2. And you'll never see one flying in the rain. Well, that's interesting because we've never seen a B-2 flying in the rain. So that's interesting. Let's continue on here. Why would aliens care if it's raining or not? So whatever this Hudson Valley Boomerang was, uh, it didn't show up during the rain. And if it was alien, why would they care or not if it's raining? They would show up during the rain, but they never did. So what that's pointing toward is a much more earthly explanation rather than something ET here. Special note, of the thousands of sightings associated with the Hudson Valley Boomerang between 1983 to 1989, none were reported during the rain. Is that a clue? Is that pointing to a defense contractor program? Let's continue on here. What was going on at Stewart Air Force Base during the early 1980s? Something fishy may have been going on here too. Difficult to prove this, but there's reports that something was going on in the 83 timeframe during this Hudson Valley wave where something might have been based there. That brings us to Gung Ho, February 1988. Al Fricke wrote a very interesting article. That's the quote-unquote name. The actual identity of this author is none other than my good friend Jim Goodall. So I want to give credit to Jim Goodall. So let's move on to the quotes within this article here. Now, he interviewed a number of personnel, and it was all published in this publication. So here we see, quote, "We are flight testing vehicles that defy description. To compare them conceptually to the SR-71 would be like comparing Leonardo da Vinci's parachute to the space shuttle." Air Force officer involved in the SR-71 developed. So what do you mean you're flying vehicles that defy description? I wonder what that means. It's not something conventional. Number two, we have things that are so far beyond the comprehension of the average aviation authority as to be really alien to our way of thinking. That's interesting. This is from a retired colonel. And last one here, let's just put it this way. We have things flying in the Nevada desert that would make George Lucas drool. So what are they talking about here? We have things so far beyond the comprehension as to be very alien to our way of thinking, things that make George Lucas drool. What could they be talking about? They're not talking about jet-powered fighter aircraft or jet-powered flying wings. There's something else going on here that hasn't been explained. So we want to try to expose some of this here. Is there another secret version of this aircraft lurking in a hangar somewhere? Something much larger that utilizes a nuclear reactor. Is there something going on here? Again, I'm not talking about the B-2. I'm talking about something else, something 50% larger than the B-2 that looks like the B-2, similar, but not exactly. Rannoch Times, July 17th, 1989. Stealth bomber makes first flight. So what we're doing here is we are discounting the B-2 stealth bomber as being the explanation for the Hudson Valley Boomerang. Why do we know this? Because sightings of this, whatever it was, boomerang-shaped craft, 150, 172-foot wingspan that could hover silently and make these flight turns. These were reported in 83. The first flight of the B-2 was July 17th, 1989. So it can't be the B-2 bomber. It must be something else, something similar to the B-2 that looks like the B-2, but's larger than the B-2. So something else is going on here. Times Union, Albany, New York, December 27th, 1987. So take a look at this map here. You've got New York, you've got Connecticut, you've got Brewster, you've got Danbury. All these locations is where this craft was seen long before the test flight of the B-2 stealth bomber. So again, I'm just driving down the point. There is something flying around that hasn't been explained that's not planes and not the B-2, but something that looks like the B-2, like another variant, another secret version of the B-2. How could the B-2 stealth bomber be responsible for the Hudson Valley UFO sightings in 1983 when it didn't fly until 1989? Just drilling down this point. There is absolutely something else going on here. Was something like this flying around the Hudson Valley during the early 1980s, something that can hover silently and that doesn't use jet engines? Is this the Westchester Boomerang? So take a look at the configuration here. You've got a boomerang-shaped craft. You've got triangle trailing edge. The we're going to look at the lighting pattern here. You've got this smooth contouring. We'll look at what it looks like on the bottom here, but this really nails the configuration of what the eyewitnesses are reporting to us. This looks very similar to what the eyewitnesses are talking about. Now, let's go with the lighting pattern. Eyewitness reports indicate that it had this boomerang-shaped lighting pattern, and then in the back of this boomerang, there was a triangle trailing edge. So when you look at Tony's model, he's duplicated this lighting pattern in his model, and it's a dead ringer for what the people reported between 1983 and 1989. Stealth bomber wing redesign in 1983, Washington Post, October 9th, 1989. In 1983, Northrop Corporation and the Air Force concluded that the stealth bomber needed a radical redesign to withstand the stresses of flying long distances at low altitude. In addition to strengthening the plane internally, the new design, which took a year and cost $1 billion, sharply altered the wing's trailing edge to provide more control surfaces. Okay, so bottom view is the B-2 that we know today. Top view is the original B-2 design. So what the Air Force decided a little bit later on during the R&D of the B-2 research project is they no longer wanted just a high altitude bombing platform. They wanted a low altitude bombing platform. And the aeroelasticity of the current configuration that you see up on top, the early configuration, wasn't strong enough. So taxpayers had to spend $1 billion redesigning this thing. So there's nothing nefarious going on here. There's nothing secret going on here. They just redesigned the wing. The point I'm making is the original design is what people reported in the Hudson Valley. So could there be some kind of tie-in there? Air Force Chief hails redesign of stealth, St. Louis Post-Dispatch, October 29th, 1988. The Air Force spent about $1 billion on a major redesign of the B-2 stealth bomber, making it less visible to radar and able to fly at a wide variety of altitudes, a Pentagon official said Friday. So then I did a little bit more digging here. B-2 bomber hearing before the Military Procurement Subcommittee of the Committee on National Security, House of Representatives, 104th Congress. This is September 12th, 1996. Here they say, almost immediately, the program began to endure numerous customer-directed programmatic changes. One of the most dramatic was a major change in the basic configuration to accommodate low-altitude penetration. The B-2 was originally designed for high-altitude penetration. In 1983, with much of the design work already complete, the Air Force initiated a redesign of the wing, necessitated by the service's perception that the B-2 must become equally well-suited for very low-altitude flight. So that tells you why the B-2 wing redesign actually took place. Now, let's go back to one of Tony's documents here. Stealth B-2, the American-made UFO. At long last, the story is breaking. Danbury eyewitnesses say UFO looks just like the B-2 bomber. Over 90% all agree. So could there be a derivative of the early B-2 that is what was seen by the witnesses of the Hudson Valley? Following a presentation I gave, this is Tony, I gave at the community college in Wytheville, Virginia recently. About 75 people attended. Eyewitnesses to the boomerang were asked to fill out a simple form. Here is what two of them had to say. Mr. Curtis Phillips had a sighting in Bristol, Tennessee at 9:30 p.m. on January 13th, 1990. Please note date. On the questionnaire, he was asked the following question. Have you been an eyewitness to a V boomerang or wing-shaped unidentified flying object? His answer to the question was yes. He also answered the following question. Do you feel you may have seen a B-2 bomber that was not performing like a jet-powered aircraft? His answer again was yes. In his written explanation, this is exactly what he said. Quote, flying below stall speed, 400 feet altitude, made a 90-degree turn with almost no decrease in velocity. I don't know of anything about B-2s except for the article in Aviation Technology, but it looked like your model. In answer to the question, how certain are you that it looked like a stealth B-2 bomber. Mr. Phillips answered 70% sure. The second witness, a man from Elk Creek, Virginia, answered yes to the same question above and responded that he was 90% certain that he saw a B-2 stealth bomber flying. In his words, very slowly, very quietly, with only a low hum. His sighting was from a distance of only 200 yards away from the object. The date and time and location of the sighting was September 26, 1989 at 8:45 p.m. in Elk Creek. So here he says, slowly and silently. So it can't be the jet-powered B-2. It's got to be something else. We have to explain this with something. It can't be planes flying in formation. It's not the B-2 stealth bomber. So could it be a secretive derivative of the B-2 that hasn't been exposed, that was funded from procurement funding from the $22.4 billion that poured into R&D funding for the B-2? Could that where this other one came from? That's a possibility. Now, Omni Magazine, April 1989. Could it be the super secret bomber is responsible for report after report of a large wing-shaped UFO? We know it's not the B-2, but could it be something else? Very definitely, the stealth has been here, says Dan Gordon, the news and sports director for radio station WYVE-AM in Whiteville, Virginia. I've got 20/20 vision, and I saw it fly over my car. To make himself heard, Gordon has just written a book called Don't Look Up about the more than 3,000 reports of UFOs over this small town in the mountains of Virginia since October 1987. Most of the sightings have been of a dark, wing-shaped craft resembling the stealth bomber. Says Gordon, unless someone has $500 million to produce a similar craft, there's no way this wing could be anything else. So he's tying in the B-2, but I'm thinking he's not basically addressing the fact that there could be something other going on here, like a derivative slightly larger than the B-2 that doesn't have jet engines. Here's the cover of his book, Don't Look Up, the real story behind the Virginia UFO sightings. So I just want to give you kind of a overview of what he's talking about here. Now, that brings us to this gentleman who was a friend of Edgar Fouché that I already talked about in one of my other presentations. These two were together back in 2016. He was over at Ed's house. Now, Dan Bankert, my good friend Dan Bankert, he had a Zoom call, and these two were talking kind of on a sidebar here. And when they came back on the Zoom call, this is what Oscar Seyfarth told Dan Bankert. I want to give credit to Dan for this. It's a little bit sketchy. We don't have much to go on, but I think this plays a major role in our story here. First of all, Oscar was a defense contractor who worked at Northrop facility, Air Force Plant 42. So Air Force Plant 42 was the final assembly for the B-2 stealth bomber. Now, Northrop earlier, they bought a Ford assembly plant in Pico Rivera, California. They converted that to a sub-assembly facility for the B-2, and then those components were brought over to Air Force Plant 42 Northrop facility for final assembly. This gentleman had a 30-year NDA that expired in 2016. So he signed it back in '86, kind of at the height of the Hudson Valley Boomerang sightings. It expired in 2016, so he could talk about it. He was very reluctant to talk. He mentioned a secret version of the B-2 that was 50% larger, could hover, was silent, and utilized 3 engines, probably MFDs, magnetic field disruptors, probably had a nuclear reactor on board. This is exactly what the Hudson Valley Boomerang witnesses reported. Exactly. And then he said, for every 3 B-2 stealth bombers produced, 1 advanced version was built, a 7 total. So could we have 7 of these secret versions? He stated that this craft was commonly mistaken for a UFO. So if we take the testimony of Oscar, we overlay that onto the eyewitness testimony of what the witnesses are telling us. It's a match. I believe that something was built by Northrop that they haven't talked about. They probably used some of that $22.4 billion to build this other version that has never been revealed. This is what was seen by the Hudson Valley witnesses between 1983 to 1989. I'm going by what this Oscar witness is telling us here. Were sightings of the Hudson Valley Boomerang associated with ASW, anti-submarine warfare? That brings us to Croton Falls Reservoir, October 28th, 1983. So we have Mr. Cook, who's driving down the perimeter of this Croton Falls area. He sees this strange craft park itself over the water. There was a curtain of light that came down. Then a probe came down like it was probing something in the water, came back up, and this flew away. So was this probing? Was this a test for anti-submarine warfare? Is that what was going on here back in 1983? Then we want to look at this. Dragon, Digital Reconnaissance and Observation Network, operated by the National Reconnaissance Office, airborne mobile over-the-horizon radar, the Westchester Boomerang. So could it be that this is the explanation? So maybe we've got a secret version of the B-2, and then we tie that to this Dragon program. Could these have been responsible for the Westchester Boomerang? Now I'm going to talk about some of the contractors here involved on this program. Northrop Primary Design, Thermoset, gyroscopes, RF Lambda, RF transmitter, Isoflex, Boron, Goodrich landing gear. So Goodrich Aerospace has absolutely been involved in the TR-3B. Now they're involved in the Dragon program. Federal Fluid Power Cooling Tubes, Marathon Norco is the battery. Nextel makes the circuits. CACI DynCorp makes the hardware. Rockwell Collins makes the software. Westcorp is the pumps. Owens Corning, BASF makes the insulation. Barium and chemicals, Sigma Aldrich Barium. Propulsion, high energy charge, quantized excited particles. Superfluid and cooling, exotic and mobile. So here you've got this silent craft flying over the Hudson Valley area, and this is a mobile airborne over-the-horizon radar that could track incoming ICBMs that couldn't be shot down because it's silent, doesn't appear on radar. You wouldn't even see it at night. So could this, in conjunction with the other craft we talked about, could this be responsible for the Hudson Valley Boomerang? This is what this thing looks like in flight. So if this is at night and you had these lighting patterns, it would look like a B-2, but it's not. It's something else. UFOs from the USA, the Times-Union, Albany, New York, February 2nd, 1989. It was an account of an investigation by ufologists into an unusually prolonged and voluminous cluster of sightings between 1983 and 1986 of the so-called Westchester Boomerang that was buzzing New York City suburbs, a huge V-shaped object that flies low and noiselessly and shines brilliant, pulsing, multicolored lights down. So again, this is not the B-2. Obviously, there's something else going on here. I believe there's another version out there of this Westchester Boomerang. Let's continue on here. Something spectacular. UFOs or formation flying pilots. No, it's not the formation flying pilots. Local boomerang sightings stir up fuss. Poughkeepsie Journal, February 8th, 1983. Now, this is Monique O'Driscoll's illustration of what she saw flying over White Pond back in 1983. Giant wing UFO spotted in Mojave. So here's another supporting piece of evidence. This is on Thursday, 1st of May, 2003, in the foothills just south of Edwards Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert of Southern California. My wife and I were driving our motorhome north towards Washington State when a large black wing appeared apparently out of thin air at an altitude of approximately 1,000 feet in a southerly direction. The wing appeared to be about the same size as a 747. It was huge. So here's another one of these flying wings, and it was being escorted by a Black Hawk helicopter. So they've got this technology. They've done it. They've done it. This is not the B-2. This is something else. This thing was like hovering next to the helicopter here. So they've absolutely got the technology. Could something like this have been responsible for the Hudson Valley Boomerang wave? And it wasn't the B-2. Let's continue on here. Let's go into Poplar Mechanics. This is December 1991. And I want to give credit to Mark McCandlish for doing this absolutely beautiful front cover of Popular Mechanics, December 1991. Here's what was reported. The big wing. Meanwhile, several Antelope Valley residents say they've seen a craft that simply strains credulity. According to reports over the past 2 years, a vast black flying wing estimated at between 600 and 800 feet in width has passed silently over the city streets, empty desert and rural freeways. The craft moves so slowly, one observer said that he could jog along with it. A pattern of seemingly random white lights on the vehicle, black underside, provided a constellation camouflage. Wow, we've heard that before. Against the starry sky, observers who followed the craft long enough detailed unlikely maneuvers in which the vehicle stopped, rotated in place, and hovered vertically, presenting a thin trailing edge to the ground. So here you've got something that can hover silently. It can hover. It can go slow flight. Joggers can pass this. So we're not talking about the jet-powered B-2. There's something else going on here. We've got conclusive evidence now that something else was going on. I do believe our witnesses here. Something probably was procured by Northrop, another version here. Please like, share, and subscribe. So what I wanted to do in this presentation is bring all this evidence together into one place. I want to look at the eyewitness testimony, the model that Tony built, what the eyewitness is telling us about the lighting pattern on the bottom, the hovering capability, the very silent flight capability, not what the B-2 can do. So what this all leads to is that something else was built during the very early 1980s, whether it's a lighter than air vehicle, which is an LTA. If we go back to Oscar's testimony, he's talking about something much more exotic, something 50% larger than the B-2 that has probably magnetic field disruptors as a power source for this particular craft. I'm going to do a check-in here. Let's take a look at what some of our comments are saying here. And let's zoom down here. Let's see here. Secret B-2, yes. And let's continue on. But anyway, thanks for joining me this evening. We're going to continue with these presentations. And thanks for all the support. And we'll see you on the next one.